It is Monday, May 9th, 2022. This is the regular council meeting of the City of Trail. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be published to the city's YouTube site. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first item of business is the adoption of the minutes. There's two sets of minutes for us tonight. Governance and Operations Committee meeting of April 25th, 2022, and the regular council meeting of April 25th, 2022. The recommendation is that both of those sets of minutes be adopted as circulated. Do I have someone to make that motion? Councillor Butler, thank you. Do I have someone to second that motion?
So moved.
Councillor Jones, thank you very much. Is there any errors or omissions on the minutes as put forward? Seeing none, all in favor? Against, if any? Carried, thank you. Ms. McIsaac, do you have any written correspondence that for the public question period?
No, I do not.
Ms. Lucchini, do you have anyone up in council chambers with you tonight?
There's no one here attending the meeting, no.
Thank you very much. And we move on to item number 3. Item number 3 is communications. We have one proclamation request for Access Awareness Day, and this is National Accessibility Week, which is celebrated from May 29th to June 4th, 2022. National Accessibility Week is designed to celebrate and recognize the contributions that individuals living with disabilities make in their communities every day. So the recommendation is that the council proclaim June 4th, 2022 as Access Awareness Day in the City of Trail. Do I have someone to make that motion?
So moved.
Councillor Santori and Councillor Butler seconded. Any questions or comments on this?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Thank you. Item number 4, bylaws. So 4.1 is financial plan bylaw number 2917-2022, first, second, and third readings. And Mr. Merlo, am I turning the floor over to you for this one? It is our budget bylaws.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So my purpose here is to present the financial plan bylaw to council. So I'll just start with as the bylaw is presented now, we have reduced the overall expenditure by approximately $44,000 as was originally presented to council on April 19th. So the general levy goes from $729,000 to $684,000, or an increase of 4.8% to an increase of 4.51%. And if council will recall, in that April 19th meeting, there was a list of 25 other BC municipalities with their draft proposal tax levy increase. And if you'll recall, the average was 4.75% and the mean was 4.5%. So as we present the bylaw, the City of Trail is right at the mean of that sample of 25 other BC municipalities with their draft or initial tax increase. So we're right, there's half are above us and half are below us based upon that sample. So this $44,000 reduction, it all is incorporated in the general government services. So our general government expenditures go from 3.17 million down to 3.127 million. And that's where our change occurs. So for an overall, we have an overall increase now of $686,677 or 4.33% as per our bylaw 2917. So we have gone through most of or all the other expenditures. And so I just wanted to highlight some of those items with the bylaw. But if there are any questions, with respect to this bylaw, I'm open to answering any questions council may have.
Brian?
I think you can proceed. I'm not sure if you were waiting, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the next, excuse me. Excuse me. The next bylaw is our tax rates bylaw. And to start off with that, I would just like to discuss the overall assessments from 2021 to 2022. Class 1, the assessments in our area were up approximately 30.5% or 261 million. Class 2 was down 2.4%. Class 4 was pretty steady at 0.85%. And class 6 was up 16.1%. So that just gives you a general idea of what we were working with as we look to deal with the tax levy, deal with apportionments, and deal with the tax rates. So how I went about apportioning the tax levy per the various classes was simply that the apportionment, and for class 1, the apportionment and tax calculation is based on the residual revenue required after apportioning the tax levies to all other tax classes. So to give you an example, the 2022 overall percentage increase for class 1 is 26.64%. In 2021, that percentage was 26.34%. For class 2, our apportionment, it's established with provincial legislation. So we are allowed a maximum mill rate of $40 per thousand. So we take that maximum and we apportion our tax levy based upon that. So for 2022, the overall percentage tax levy with class 2 is 4.13%, which is a reduction from 2021, where we had an apportion of 4.42%. So you'll notice that in those two classes, class 1 had an increase of 0.29%, class 2 had a reduction of 0.29%. So there's where basically our change was with our apportionment. So if we go to class 4, major industry, and as council knows, it's policy for the city of Trail to max out at 61.33%. And we've been doing this now since 2015. So that's where our class 4 overall tax levy is maxed out at 61.33%. Classes 5, 6, 7, and 8, our taxes are apportioned to each class. It's based on the net increase in the property tax levy as compared to a prior year. So I'll discuss class 6 because it's an important class as well. And again, I made the judgment that we would keep the overall tax levy percentage increase with class 6 at 7.76%, the same as it was in 2021. Even though the pie is increased by the 4.51%, the slices of the pie have remained consistent from year to year. And so I thought that was based upon past practice and consistency of application, based upon policy, and I based that upon reasonable fairness. So that's how we apportioned our tax amounts, which then takes us to our tax rates. And so based upon the apportionment, we now get our tax rates, which is per our bylaw 2918. And so based upon what I've just described to you, does council have any questions for me on our tax rates?
It doesn't look like it. Mr. Merlot, if you'd like to proceed.
I was on mute, Lisa.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just with respect to the assessment, the residential, is it pretty consistent within all of the subdivisions in Trail in terms of the increase, or are we seeing significant increases in different parts of the city?
We're seeing consistent increases across the board. Some areas, of course, increased greater than others. And off the top of my head, I don't have specific numbers for you, but I can provide that if that's something Councillor Santori would like to see. But overall, there was a significant increase in assessments.
Okay, no, that's fine, thank you.
Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Sorry, my internet is telling me that my computer is telling me my internet is unstable at this time, and I missed Councillor Santori's question.
I just asked Colleen whether or not the increase in assessment, which was about 26 or 28%, if it was equal amongst all the subdivisions, Sunningdale, Tadnak, or did we see significant increases in some areas and pretty much steady in others? But Reno responded that it was pretty consistent throughout the city, although there was some probably higher assessment increases in certain areas in the community, but overall it was relatively consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions for Mr. Merlot? No? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Merlot.
Thank you, Your Worship. And finally, our bylaw number 2919, which is the reserve funds bylaw. We're going to draw monies from 3 reserves this year, or per the bylaw, look to draw monies from 3 reserves, from the equipment reserve, the field house reserve, and the capital works reserve. The equipment reserve fund will be used to upgrade our fleet expenditures. There is enough money within this reserve to be able to fund our capital requests for 2022. The Fieldhouse Reserve Fund will be used to fund the proposed new roof on the field house. And again, there's enough money in our reserves to fund that project. And then finally, the Capital Works Reserve Fund, we propose to draw $100,000 from that fund to help offset all the grant monies that we will use for the Butler Park netting and lighting project. And so if there's any questions on our reserve fund bylaw, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, is there any questions from council?
What's our current reserve sitting at total, Reno?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that to you.
Okay, no rush. If you could just email it to me, that'd be great.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Merlot? Seeing none. Okay, Mr. Merlot, did you have anything else to ask or to indicate in your presentation?
At this point, then I would defer to CAO Ms. McIsaac to move forward on the bylaws.
Okay. Michelle, did you want to do any kind of lead in at all, or should we move to adoption?
I think Mr. Merlot has certainly done the heavy lifting with the preparation of the budgets for this year, and has given the explanation of the 3 companion bylaws. So we do need to have separate motions and separate readings of the financial plan bylaw, the tax rates bylaw, and the reserve fund expenditure bylaw. So it would be recommended that council proceed with first, second, and third readings of bylaw number 2917, the financial plan for the years 2022 to 2026 at tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Okay, So Counselor Santori, and do I have someone to second that motion? Counselor Butler, thank you. Any final questions on this motion or on the financial plan bylaw number 2917? Seeing none, all in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Thank you. So then we move on to 4.2, which is the tax rate bylaw, and this is 2918/2022. This is first, second, and third readings. Ms. McIsaac, did you have anything else to add before I ask for someone to make a motion on this?
I did not, Your Honor.
Okay,
Your
thank
Worship.
you.
Thank you.
So the recommendation is that tax rates bylaw number 2918/2022 receive its first, second, and third readings. Do I have someone to make that motion?
So moved.
Counselor Butler, thank you. Do I have someone to second that motion? Counselor Jones, thank you very much. Is there any questions on this or any more comments?
Just a comment.
Go for it.
You know, the 4.5% increase or it's probably higher than what we normally would have approved, but I think the public needs to, you know, recognize that in the last year, there was a 0% increase, or has it been the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, Reno?
It was 2020 where there was no increase.
Right.
And 2021, the increase was 3.9%. So one could argue we're still catching up a little bit from a municipal point of view with that no increase.
Yeah, I just want to point out to the public that overall, I think over the last 3 years, we're probably well below the norm of most municipalities. And in order to avoid anything like a 4.5% increase would definitely impact services. And I'm convinced that the citizens are very satisfied with the level of service that they're getting. And again, as much as we don't like 4.51%, I think it's quite reasonable when we take the last 3 years in context in terms of the challenges that we've had. So obviously I'm in support of the bylaw 2918.
Perfect. Any other comments on this? No? Okay, all in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. The last bylaw for the financial section is 2022 Reserve Fund. This is the expenditure bylaw number 2919/2022. This is first, second, and third readings. There is a recommendation put forward to have 2022 Reserve Fund expenditure bylaw number 2919 receive its first, second, and third readings. Do I have someone to advance that motion? Counselor Jones, thank you. Do I have someone to second that motion? Counselor Santori, thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions on the Reserve Fund bylaw? No? Okay, all in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Perfect, thank you. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Merlo, for all your hard work in doing this this budget. I know it was your first time going through it, and you did a commendable job under challenging circumstances. And it's really great that we've come out with what we have. And thank you for council as well for sitting in on the meetings and participating in robust discussion around creation of this budget. We're moving on to 4.4, which is a zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2920/2022. This is first and second readings. And Ms. McIsaac, I'll turn the floor over to you, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The city is in receipt of an application from the property owner of 1618 Knight Street in Waneta, applying to rezone the property from single-family residential R1 to single-family residential R1S to allow for the development of a secondary suite on the property. Ms. Cashman is the property owner of 1618 Knight Street, and she is proposing to expand and renovate an accessory building on the property to develop a secondary suite that would be sized approximately 42 square meters. And there is a site plan attached with the council reporting that was provided with your agendas. As a reminder to council, back in 2020, council enacted regulations pertaining to secondary suites, and added into section 317A of the zoning bylaw requirements that would allow for secondary suites to be permitted in the single family residential R1 and single and two family residential R2 zones. But what was done was that it does require rezoning so that council can consider each application on its own merits, and public input can be sought with respect to the application for rezoning to allow for the secondary suite. And so with respect to the application before you, that is what the property owner, Ms. Cashman, is seeking. Noted that the subject property is located in the Juanita Junction neighborhood. It's quite large in size. The property is 1,750 square meters in size, and it's surrounded by properties that are zoned for either single family residential or multi-family residential use. The property is very suitably sized for the proposed development of a secondary suite on it, and would have more than sufficient lot area to satisfy the off-street parking requirements. When the changes were made to our zoning bylaw, we did restrict the maximum size of the secondary suite to 40% of the total floor area of the principal dwelling. And as proposed, the secondary suite would meet that size restriction. The total floor area of the principal building on the property is 134 square meters in size. And that would allow a secondary suite of up to 53.5 square meters, whereas they're only proposing a 42 square meter secondary suite. So that represents approximately 31% of the floor area as compared to the 40% that would be permitted as a maximum. It is felt that the residential development proposed aligns with the residential neighborhood, and in the opinion of staff, it should not negatively impact neighboring properties. But as in the case with any rezoning, if council does proceed with first and second readings of the zoning bylaw as is being recommended tonight, staff would take action to schedule a public hearing for just prior to the next regular council meeting, which would be held Tuesday, May 24th, starting at 6 p.m. It's also important to note that because the subject property is located within 800 meters of a controlled access highway, Section 52 of the Transportation Act does require that the bylaw be advanced to the Ministry of Transportation for approval prior to its adoption. And so if the bylaw does receive its first and second readings at tonight's meeting, the bylaw will be referred by staff to the ministry accordingly. And lastly, just wanted to comment on the regional housing needs assessment that was prepared by the regional district, and the report was received and adopted by the city. It's titled the House and Home RDKB Housing Needs Report. And in it, it identified a need for a range of housing types, not only in Trail, but in the whole of the region. And so if this rezoning is approved, the proposed development may create some much needed rental housing, although on a very small scale. And so it is being recommended that the zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2920 receive its first and second readings at tonight's meeting.
I would move accordingly.
Okay, Councillor Santori, do I have someone to second that? Councillor Butler, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on this bylaw amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Thank you. Okay, the consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda. Report on invoices paid for municipal services, April 1st to 30th, 2022, and Trail and District Public Library 2022 first quarter report. The recommendation is that the items on the consent agenda be received for information. Do I have someone to make that motion?
Move is circulated.
Councillor Santori, thank you. Do I have someone to second that? Councillor Butler, thank you. All in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Does anyone want anything pulled out of this packet of consent agenda items? No? Okay, perfect. And we can move for adjournment. It's 6:25.
Mayor
Oh,
Payton,
sorry.
just as for the public record, because we are required to adopt the financial bylaws by May 15th, we are holding a special council meeting on Wednesday, May 11th at 11:30 a.m. And so an agenda will be published for that meeting, and it will deal only with the adoption of the 3 financial bylaws that were considered at tonight's meeting.
Okay, perfect. So 6:26. And we'll move for adjournment. Do I have someone to make that motion? Counselor Santori, thank you very much. Okay, have a nice evening, everyone. Take care.